Okay, welcome everyone to this July, what's today? 7th.
Seven.
July 7th version of Healthy Happy Living in the Spotlight. My name is Stephanie Hinkstenberg, if you don't know it already, and I am just so glad that you're here. I started networking pretty heavily with a lot of really amazing people, and in the last 2 years, I've met some incredible people that have superpowers beyond my imagination. And so I decided to create this interview series so that I could share those people with everyone else that I know and people that I don't know, because I just feel like it's very important, especially in this day and age, to learn a little bit more about these amazing practitioners and what they do. And I felt like it was selfish of me to keep it to myself. So might as well do some interviews and let you guys know and let you in on a little bit of something about these people that makes them special. So today I'm so excited to interview the beautiful Vanessa Sanford. Now I will tell you, I saw her speak the first time, gosh, like 2.5 years ago at a ladies who launch event for the Frisco Arts Association, and I was blown away immediately. I just saw this energy in her, this beautiful light of service and a desire to help. And so I'm really excited to interview her today because I've been wanting to do this for a long time. So manifesting dreams, that's what we do. Anyway, so Vanessa, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So, Vanessa Sanford, and I am Mexican American, first generation born here. My parents immigrated here from Mexico in the late 60s. And so I've lived one foot in the Mexican culture and one foot in the American culture since I was born. And I always think about it like having one laced up tennis shoe and one zapata on my foot. So it's been a very interesting experience just to grow up, and I so that's important. And then I am big advocate for civil rights, and I have a family. I live here in Frisco, Texas, and I'm a therapist. So I work with lots of people from age 2 and up, and just explore mental health in lots of different ways. And so honored to do that work. And got 2 children, one that is taller than me, like 6'2". He would not call himself a child. He's in his 20s.
Yes.
And then I've got a daughter, and my husband is a veteran, and we're very close with my parents. And so I own my own business. I bought a little grandma house in downtown Frisco, and it's about 100 years old, and my dream come true. And the work that I love to do is just to help people know that they're enough and feel empowered. So it's just an honor to be able to do that with my work.
That's fantastic. Okay, you answered a lot of questions in that, so I love that. We might revisit a couple of those. So you're telling me that, well, where specifically did you grow up?
I was born in Denver, Colorado, and I am the only girl and baby of the family, so that may come out and making sense in some of my interview. But so we moved to Dallas when I was 2, and I grew up in a small suburb. It's called Duncanville, and yeah, one high school. I had 1,000 people in my high school class, so pretty big. And so I grew up there, and then moved up here whenever my son was ready to start kindergarten, and we've been in Frisco since 2002.
Okay, that's wonderful. So you've seen a lot of growth in Frisco because,
Yes.
okay, so my dad, this is sidebar, but my dad worked in Frisco when there wasn't anything here. Like 121 was a two-way street with one blinking light in between Frisco and Louisville kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the growth that I've seen in this city is absolutely insane. And we've only been here since 2008. So since 2012, it's even bigger, right?
Oh yeah. So in 2002, when we got here, we were telling people to come visit us, and we would just say, just go up the tollway until it ends, and then turn left on the dirt road.
Right.
And so yeah, it's dramatically changed. And some of that is amazing, just prosperity and growth. And then, just to learn that sometimes growth has aches and pains in it too. So just watching that as a therapist and
Yeah.
working with lots of people that live in Frisco, that's
Yeah.
interesting to see a big spectrum of that.
Yeah. So have you seen a sort of a shift in the need for what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the perspective, because I work with a lot of kids in the school district,
Hmm.
and I am, culturally just picking up on a lot of pressures to achieve. That's the number one value that I feel creates a lot of anxiety in a lot of the clients that I see. A lot of pressure, and I just remember I've been a mentor for a lot of Frisco students in the ISM program, which is a mentorship program through in a junior and senior year. They can take that class, and I just remember them sliding their resumes over to me in their mock interviews, and like how heavy their resumes are, how shiny and full of accolades and volunteer work. I mean, it's just so covered in stuff. And, my first question is, how you doing?
Yeah.
And they're tired, and they're missing their friends and missing sleep. And I'll never forget, I had a teenager that I was mentoring, and she just asked me, so is the point of all this work and achievement and AP classes and focus on getting into the right colleges, is the point of that to be a tired adult? Because I don't want
Oh,
that.
oh, that's big. That's
So big,
so big
so big,
for
so
a
big.
teenager to recognize that and
Yeah,
to to be bold enough and brave enough to ask the question,
yeah,
because that can change the trajectory of their life.
yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I
Wow.
thought that was brilliant because, I think in American culture, in my experience, there's no siestas encouraged. And in Mexico, the towns shut down for 2 to 3 hours for family meals. Uh,
Mm,
and that's just not encouraged here. That's wasting time. And productivity is really valued. And, just think about that. If you're talking to somebody, a lot of responses when you ask how they're doing is they're so tired and so busy.
mhm.
And so rest and play aren't something encouraged.
Right. Or
And so
built
just
in.
noticing the different cultures in that, and how you're expected to be on call and work, every hour of the day, and how in other cultures, like in where my family is from, that rest is important,
Mm,
and play is important, and family time is important. So it's just different to see it and experience
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Fascinating. I could keep going on that for like 3 hours. So we're going to move along. But so you live now in Frisco, and we've talked a little bit about what has that looked like for you? How is that different from Duncanville for you, or, you know, um, anything in particular besides just the growth and seeing what you're seeing?
Yeah, as a therapist, one of the things that I think we have not really spent a lot of time on, and I just kind of was listening to this the other day from a podcast, but how environment can play such a role in our lives and how impactful it is.
Mm,
And I was listening to that from an interview from the woman who wrote Little Fires Everywhere, and
okay.
that how it got adapted into a TV show with Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington, and how the environment of that city and town really played a big part in the story.
Mm,
So, just thinking about that, for me, growing up in Duncanville, I was surrounded by a lot of white people, and
mhm,
I was always the one brown person in the group.
mm,
And so I was very Americanized. My parents did not teach me Spanish. They wanted me to really get integrated into the culture in Duncanville.
thing.
So I didn't learn Spanish until I was in college by my own choice. And
Mm,
even going back and visiting Mexico, all my cousins wanted to learn Spanish or learn English. So I just didn't get to have that part growing up. So, you know, in Duncanville, I was very active. I had a very safe home, loving parents. So just, you know, did all the things. I did dance and cheer and basically swimming. I just did everything that I could possibly get my hands on. And I was grateful that we could afford to do that, and that my parents just supported any interest that I had. And so I grew up, you know, there, and then moved to Frisco after my husband and I got married, but we did things a little out of the tradition. We had our son first, and then waited to grow up a little bit before we decided to get married. So yeah, stepping into more of an adult lifestyle here in Frisco. So yeah, very different here. Still definitely not a lot of people the same color as me, so that's still the same. But you know, I think I've been used to that for a long time. But just being open and supportive of anybody that's marginalized or oppressed. So that's what I get to do in my work, is really be an inclusive and affirming place.
Which is it's an amazing thing, because that is necessary on so many different levels to have a place like that.
Yes.
And one of the reasons that I do interviews like this is to get more awareness that to people, to say, hey, listen, this is available. That's right. This is here for you to utilize. So that's wonderful. Well, okay. So what do you consider one of your superpowers?
So, I don't know if I would call it a superpower.
Sure. Some people don't.
But one of the things that I am most curious about, and what I find I spend a lot of time in whether it's my own personal work or just with relationships or in the work that I do with clients, is what one of my friends called neck down work. We put a lot of emphasis on what we think. And we forget we have a body. And we always giggle about how, you know, our body is not just the part of us that transports our thoughts from place to place. Like, it actually has a lot of purpose.
Right.
And I truly believe that our body is our truth teller. And it'll shut us down if we ignore it and don't take care of it. And so I think for me, that's what I find important in the mental health work that I do, is really connecting what we think into how we feel and how to integrate that into our lives, and really carrying our body around as something to respect and listen to.
I love that.
So that's really important. And also, you know, the other thing I find important is I love and value sensitivity. I'm such a sensitive person. And it's important to honor that versus kind of the common statements of you're too sensitive, or you think of that too much. And I work with lots of people that are very sensitive. And so how to cultivate that with health is something I love.
That's very important to do, and more important work to do. Yes, absolutely. Because there is a stigma around that. If you show too much emotion, or you even wear it on your sleeve or something like that, that can be viewed in a certain way in a certain place. So learning how to utilize that and turn it into a superpower for yourself that's huge. That's really big. Well, what if, we're living in a different time right now with this lovely quarantine that we won't say too much about it, but what have you found, now that we've had this time, and it's been a couple of months now, so what have you found that you love about this time?
Yeah, I don't know if I love this time, but I think about a couple of things. One is I have found my mentor and leader through quarantine is Dory from Finding Nemo.
Okay. Yes.
Because think about Dory. She is, when she remembers her way home, she's so excited and focused on getting home. And she's got these people that she's trusted to keep her safe. Mm-hmm. But as soon as she gets on her way of going home, she forgets. Something distracts her. She gets, something, gets her attention away from home. And then she has to be reminded. And so
Mm,
I think about that in this experience of a pandemic and this experience of racial awareness and a lot of movement towards inclusion and affirmation for marginalized and oppressed people, like both happening at the same time. That
mm,
for me, the work is I'm going to remember it and then I'm going to forget it. And then I'm going to remember it, I'm going to forget it. And that can relate to my own health or my own rest or my own recovery. But it's a lot of short-term memory loss that I have to keep remembering.
yeah.
And the movement is slow. And I've got to make sure I've got trusty people around me to keep reminding me when I forget my way.
That
Um,
is really important. I mean, that's really important that's a great illustration too, because, you get caught up in the day.
yeah,
You can get caught up in the day and in what's going on or what's scrolling on social media for the love or whatever it is. And so that shiny object that takes your attention away is just right there in our faces all the time.
it is. And it distracts us from work. And that's so important. And so the other thing that I find useful during this time is Mr. Rogers has a quote about from his mother that when he sees scary news to look for the helpers. And
Mhm.
so that to me is such a refuge, and it helps me feel resilient, and it helps me lean into being a helper myself, so that I'm not part of the scary news, I'm part of the helpers. Whether it's marching or donating or learning or speaking up or whatever it is, I want to be one of the helpers
Yeah.
that's doing the right thing.
We talk about another great example of an exciting way to live,
Yeah,
honestly, is to just live out of love and do things from a
that's
loving perspective.
that's right.
Oh, that's what we're trying so very much to express to our kids, but then also teach them what
That's right.
that looks like and what healthy ways to do that, what that
Yeah.
looks like. So that's wonderful. Um, well, what do you feel like one of your all-time favorite accomplishments to date would be?
I think for me, I grew up being such a people pleaser,
Mm,
just wanting to be liked and saying yes all the time, even though I didn't really want to, and kind of living with this like baggage of resentment.
mm,
And so I feel so proud of unlearning some of those people pleasing messages and practicing better boundaries and saying no and not having to over explain myself and not apologizing for things that don't need apology, like um if I'm if there was I don't remember, I think it was Wanda Sykes, she was doing um a comedy show, and she was just talking about how women apologize, like they'll be the ones that somebody runs into and they'll say sorry. And so I remember doing that, like just somebody would do something to me and I'm apologizing for taking up space. And so I don't do that anymore. And it creates friction, because I'm not as accommodating or pleasing. But I definitely have less resentment about it. So I think for me, that's what I'm most proud of,
mm.
is how much I value and practice boundaries now.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's a, and then again, if we're learning programming from the people that are teaching us our
Yes.
programming, and then we realize that we have that programming, and then, oh, wait, we can choose something different.
Hmm.
Very
It's so
freeing.
liberating
Yeah,
to be
it's
like, oh,
freeing.
I don't have to follow this rule. Oh,
Hmm.
cool. I can say
Hmm.
no. Neat.
Yeah. And honestly, it's interesting to recognize that from a parent perspective too.
Hmm.
That I don't have to do the same things that I was taught, or I can do the same things that I was taught, and perhaps I will get the same result
Yes.
out of what I gave as opposed to doing something different. So that's an interesting thing from both sides of the perspective. Well, what is the reason that you have chosen to, because I really do think you're really good at what you do. So what was the driving force of that? What is the why behind why you are striving to be the best, therapist that you can be?
I mean, I have two pretty profound moments that come up immediately. One is when I was a little girl, I was 11, and I was at church camp. And it makes me giggle just saying those, because I think lots of stories start that way. But so we had an option to dress up as clowns and go to a local children's hospital to cheer them up as some volunteer work. And I just thought that was so cool. I also thought it was cool that I would be able to paint my own face, which is such a risk. So I did my own face. It was probably pretty bad because I did not wear makeup at 11 years old.
Right, right.
But there's a moment seared in my brain where we were at the children's hospital. I was more of an observer. There was this little boy in a wheelchair. He was quadriplegic, and he was surrounded by all these clowns. And he was not thinking this was fun. He was just eyebrows down, and they worked so hard to try to cheer him up and make him laugh. And there was just nothing, crickets. I mean, they just were not getting any feedback from him. And I was so fascinated about this. And so they walked away, and I remember just walking up, just so curious as an 11-year-old. And so I just kind of stood in front of him, kind of like, I'm so interested in you. And so he looked at me, and I just remember him smiling. So then I smiled, and then he smiled and showed his teeth. And so I showed my teeth, and then he just started laughing. And I was so confused as to why he was laughing, but it was such a neat, sacred moment of not wanting to repeat what just happened, where there was a lot of pressure and force, but letting him lead with him smiling first. And the nurse was like, "How did you make him laugh?" I was like, "I don't know. I just did what he did." And so that moment was so interesting, and I couldn't put words around it at 11, but I just kept following those little nuggets of, that's so interesting. And what is that about? And what is it about people that can make them feel safe enough to laugh, or safe enough to show a part of themselves, show their teeth, smile so big. And so that really started something in me, like a seed that started to grow. And I didn't know it was going to end up in mental health, but it did. That just moment of like connection was so powerful. So that was one. And then the other one was when my son was born. I was 18 years old, just graduated high school. Definitely not the plan that I had. But I just remember him being born, little buddy, just on my chest. He was just born. And I had all my high school friends coming to visit me, and they were kind of in the background, just visiting and talking. And I just remember this moment of like, oh, like I don't have that life anymore. I have this life, and I need to be responsible for him. I can't just be an 18-year-old that gets to be free and make dumb choices. I've got to make really smart choices so that I can raise him and create a life for him and me. And those two are important. And that's what I think has led me to just be really conscious about choices that I make and what kind of life I want to live. And I screw up all the time, but I always try to go back to remembering those moments as a way to stay intentional.
It's your compass. That's your driving force. That's amazing. And to have that experience of, the word that comes to me into mind, especially with the first story, is allowing.
Yeah.
And allowing an energy or allowing a response to come from someone else. That's such a powerful thing. And I'm sure an extremely useful tool doing what you do, because I don't think that you can force anybody to open up with you doing what you do. That's amazing. Wow. So do you have any success stories within your work that you can compliantly share, something that, is your favorite success story from what you do?
Sure. So so I'm in private practice now, but I've been blessed to really have jobs in all the continuum of care, from an inpatient psych unit all the way down to, in private practice, you're at the most level of function. without so much intense support. In inpatient, you're at the least amount of function and you need the most support. So I've had the whole spectrum. And in kind of the middle spectrum, I worked at a nonprofit agency called the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center. And they focus on really fighting against child abuse. And my role was working with the recovery part of somebody who's had that experience. And so I love art. It's such an important part of integration for me. Like, I think it's cool to talk about stuff, but how do you now practice it? And I think art is such a great way. Writing is a great way. Movement is a great way. But one of my favorite is we created an art show. And so we would shut down the agency for one night a year, and clients had, you know, decided to participate if they wanted to, and they would create their story in art form. And this was all ages, so littles to adults. And we would adorn all the hallways with their art and have a little description of the art piece. And then I would work with schools that are local that wanted to do some volunteer work, and we would have teenagers design the invitations, and we would work with local restaurants to donate the food, and we would hire musicians to come. And it was only invitation only for the clients and family members that they wanted to attend. And so, you know, walking into an agency like that, typically they're walking in because something bad happened to them. But that night they walked in because they're artists, and this was their exhibit. And it was so cool. They would get dressed up and they would walk the hallways like an art museum and tell their story and look at other people's stories and have food and music and celebration. And it was so much fun. And I'm so proud of that. And in Frisco, in private practice, the mentorship that I mentioned, one of the students that I worked with, we were able to recreate that art show with a domestic violence shelter here locally, and really turn their stories into art and do the very same thing where they got to get dressed up and have food and celebrate their stories on the walls. And it was just, it's such a fun way to share your story versus what a lot of people think about who've had trauma and how hard it can be. So one of my favorites.
You know, I love my art.
Me too.
I love it. love that. That's fantastic. Well, what do you feel like is I know I wrote in the question, the word failure, you know, what is one of your failures, but I really love to use the word learning.
Yeah,
because I really believe that that's true. But for the sake of everybody and being on the same page of what we're talking about, what would you say is one of your failures or one of the things that you learned the most about?
I don't know if I'm afraid of failure, because I just think that's part of success, is you're going to have to learn how to get back up. But one of this is something a colleague and I actually wrote in a chapter of a book, because it's such a failure that I had. So, and it was a learning experience. So my colleague, her name's Sarah Willerson, and she owns Horses, Heart and Soul out in Pilot Point. So she is a social worker, and she's got horses and 19 acres. And so what we would do is partner together with my work and her work for groups. And so I have zero horse experience, zero. I think I rode a pony when I was little, like nothing.
Yeah.
And anyway, so we were doing a group, and it was with teenagers, and the activity we were doing was a mindfulness practice. So the only job that I had was to stand in front of one horse and make sure the horse didn't move, because Sarah was leading a guided meditation so that they can release some emotion. And each teenager selected a horse that they had connected with.
Okay.
And so everybody's in a circle. We've got helpers and Sarah, and everybody's job is to literally just let Sarah lead, let the horses do their thing, and me just be still and quiet. So the client that I was with and the horse, the client started sobbing, like loud sobbing, like the double pumping. And so and the horses, I'm holding the horse's head in my hand. She's asleep because she's just so calm, and letting this teenager sob and hug her as just a sturdy, like, comfort, right?
Wow.
But the client is crying so loud. So I try to step over and check on the client, and the horse wakes up and blocks my view, like moves her head in front to block me. And I get real arrogant and I'm like, oh, no, I'm the therapist. I've had all this training. I am going to check on my client. But none of this is out loud. We're just doing this in our heads. I'm giving dirty looks. The horse is giving me dirty looks back. And so I kind of go back and I'm like, I'm going to try again because she's crying louder. And so I lean over a little further and the horse moves her front leg and blocks me. Like, lady, you're not getting it. And I'm like, horse, you're not getting it. So then we go back and I'm like, I'm going to really have to like dodge this horse and like not paying attention to what the client's doing. Like, she just is letting out stuff. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I made up a whole story about me that I needed to address. So I step away again, like bigger this time. And this gust of wind comes and blows my hat off. And the horse behind me is terrified of moving objects from her own trauma, bolts and takes off from the teenager that was with her. And then there was another horse that just kind of stood still in all the chaos. So I like screwed everything up. That was supposed to be this guided calm meditation. But it was this amazing discussion that started to happen. So I had to apologize for my arrogance to the teenager because she was like, I didn't need you. I just needed to have a space to let out what I needed to let out. I didn't need anybody to say anything. The horse was what I needed. And I was like, ooh, I screwed that up. And then the horse that took off behind me because my hat flew off, the teenager was able to recognize, oh, that's what I do when I'm scared. I run. And so the horse was able to come back and she was like, oh, that's what I need to learn is how to return after I've run away. And
oh my gosh.
the other horse that just stood still and grounded, the teenager was like, this is what I need from my mom, is to be with me when all this chaos is going on. So it was so beautiful. But, you know, I had horses and wind really trying to get me out of my own way to let the process happen. And so it's such an interesting story. But anyway, it's just, so I never wear hats out there anymore. But it was my own arrogance. I just kept pushing and I didn't trust that the horses had it or nature had it. And I like Dory, I forget all the time. And I have to get my these moments to teach me to back off.
You know what's interesting though, that you would not have had those other two responses had you not tried so hard to check. You know, you wouldn't have had these other two people come to massive realizations about what they are finding in their own life had that not happened. So that's another reason why, you know, I love that you and I are on the same page about failure, that, you know, it's, you know, a situation that happens that maybe isn't ideal for what you feel like or your perception of a good situation or a successful situation is. But for those two folks, man, it was way more successful than you could have ever imagined. That's amazing. Oh, wow. What a cool story. Well, awesome. Well, I know that I could sit and talk to you for probably 4 hours and just keep you on my little interview for this long time, but I know I also want to respect everybody's time. So I do need to ask, like, for you, what is your ideal client? Who, you know, is there a certain age range that you are looking to serve most? And then how do people find you if they need to get in touch with you so that they can see if you're a good fit for their need and your service?
Yeah, I don't know if I have an ideal client. I mean, I feel really lucky to work with people who even challenge me and don't, you know, because therapists, you know, it's kind of fun to have clients that, you know, are just actively ready to do the work and, you know, it kind of feels really smooth, but those don't teach you as much. And so I do enjoy some challenge where there's pushback and, you know, resistance, because it's not about me. It's about their path and their time and how fast or slow they need to go. because we're partners in it. So I don't ever find it useful to put all the power in the professional because we have a zillion blind spots. So I guess if I would use the word ideal, it would be somebody actively willing to speak up and partner with me versus somebody that just hands me all of their struggles and say, you fix it. Because
Yes.
that's just not going to work. And I say, no, 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 you're not for fixing.
Right.
And I don't know everything. So it's a partnership.
Yeah.
But I love teenagers. They're probably one of my favorite groups to work with because the teenagers that I work with pay attention. I mean, they are so into paying attention to what's going on. And they're teaching me a lot about this incongruence around what adults teach but don't practice. And a lot of teenagers are really good at pointing out the hypocrisy of how they're told that, you know, you need to make all these good choices, but they're not watching adults make these good choices. So,
oh, that's so hard, isn't it?
but I love teenagers for that because they're so good at calling it out and they're paying attention to, and they feel a lot of pressure to fix things. They don't love hearing, hey, we have so much hope in your generation because we keep screwing it up. So, you know, they don't like that burden in the teenagers that I work with, but they're so interested in making it better. And so I just love teenagers for that. But I love all humans. I definitely want to celebrate those that are marginalized and oppressed. I work with the LGBTQIA. I work with just any marginalized group. I love working with immigrants and people of color, since I'm a person of color. So just really open to just being an ally and affirming anybody that's open to being willing to do this work. So
fantastic. I think that's fantastic. I think one other thing that really needs to be known is that not only do you go to this place where there are horses, but from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, you still love to work with the animals too. So if somebody has an animal that they want to bring along with them for their sessions, that they're welcome to in your space, which is amazing.
Absolutely. Oh, well, and I love animals. And on the exit door right above it, it says, if all else fails, hug the dog. So, and you know, in doing telehealth right now, one of my favorite parts about it is all the pets that join in, like they're ready for the session. They're knocking at the door. They're in every session and they get right in the screen. Like, it's just so fun to see all the pets. So I love animals. They're good teachers for us. So, and just to find me, I'm pretty old school. So I just have a website, sanfordsupportsystem.com. That's really it. I'm not on social media at all. So that's the way to contact me.
That's the way to find her, folks. That's the way to find her. And what we'll do is we'll post that not only in the YouTube channel so that people can just go right there, but wherever I do post this online, because I'm planning on sharing this in a couple of different places, I'll put that link so that you guys can go there as well and just have that easily and readily available. But I just cannot thank you enough for your time today and for just allowing this conversation to happen, because there's so much great value in it. And I just adore you. I think that the work that you're doing is so important, and just thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you. Thank you. It was so fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, wonderful. Have a great day, everyone. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.